The Executive Lounge is empowered by Villa Monticello, Ghana's premium boutique hotel. Villa Monticello, your home of tranquility.
Is this something you learned? Were you born an entrepreneur?
You got to start small.
I have not allowed being a woman to hold me back.
Credibility is not just making money, it's about making sure that people trust what you're doing.
Law practice is not only about going to court, it's about advice.
It's very difficult to hire somebody who's not motivated and then make them motivated.
One of the things that I'm known for is integrity.
They have to see you as a person of integrity.
Welcome to the Executive Lounge with me, Inshira Addo. This is your favorite thought leadership program that brings you nuggets of insights from the lives and experiences of men and women who have either managed or grown and built their own businesses. Well, today we're joined by a woman who has had a stint in the media. She's done events and now she focuses on education. She's an educator. She's the founder of the Young Educators Foundation right here in Ghana. And they bring you the spelling bee. Eugenia Tachie-Menson, you're welcome.
Thank you, Inshira.
It's, I think, a long overdue conversation. I've always wondered, why education?
Well, that's a good question, really, because nobody's asked that before. And the context typically would be, so why education? And the context is formal. But my definition of education is the informal setting. A lot more happens informally in terms of learning than does formally. A lot of our children learn more outside of the classroom. So there's peer learning, for example, which typically does not happen in the classroom. A lot of our young ones would learn about the taboo topics, sex, drugs, and whatever, outside of a classroom. So for me, I thought that it was about time that we focused on that area and managed it better. Peer learning is great, but our youth can be misinformed. Some of us have fallen victim to that. And so with that in mind, and also the fact that I am a product of my past, which allowed for learning outside of the classroom and the benefits that accrued me, I thought that I noticed that it was actually not in the market anymore, that we had moved away from understanding that learning in itself is a universal concept and so cannot be limited to the classroom in any way or form. So that's how the journey started. Okay,
actually. So it's safe to say that you believe that learning in the classroom is as equally important as learning outside of the classroom.
Maybe I would have said that 10 years ago when I started, well, 12 years now when I started. But I'm gradually arriving at the point that learning outside of the classroom probably does a bit more than learning in the classroom. And there are examples abound. I mean, recently I was reminded by a teenager of the likes of Kwame Despite, who didn't have formal education, but have a lot to show for their informal education. And so, that goes to speak volumes. If a young person has identified, and he's a student, and if he's identified that, then we are coming to the point where we need to accept it, that formal education, the way we interpret it, needs to be reviewed and relooked at. The committing things to memory and regurgitating, the quoting of people from 50 years ago and 60 years ago, where we can't query some of these theories. Who was it who said that? Sorry, it's just slipped my mind. I had a quote I was going to put across, but the position I've held and I've come to learn is that a lot of these quotes we all use were relevant in their time. So I remember that someone spoke about women's empowerment in the 21st century, but some 20, 25, 30 years ago in Ghana, women's empowerment was equal to tie and dye and soap making businesses. Today, that is not the story. It's way beyond that. And so I come back to the same point about how we are interpreting formal education where it does not evolve. We're still studying in the universities. We're still studying things that our fathers and our grandfathers learned. Meanwhile, the models upon which we build our educational system they revise their curriculum almost every semester. But we're still where we are.
So it seems we're losing the dynamism of education.
I think we've lost it.
There's a school of thought that whilst the world is gravitating towards educating, we're doing schooling. And so there hasn't been the need. It's as though schoolings get people into a system where they learn a specific set of things that guide them through life. Whereas education is that you allow people to interact with their environment and with each other and learn as they go along. If you today had the power, infinite power, to change how we do education today at the basic level, what would you think would be one or two ingredients that we ought not to leave out of the mix?
So I'll tell you what I will put in the mix immediately. I would require and hire all the professors in the universities at the primary level.
Wow.
The primary level is the foundation. If you're not getting it right at the foundation, you're not going to get it right at the university. And we see that around us. We're the same ones who are saying you can't get today's graduate to string sentences together or write a proposal, a CV with no grammatical errors. The problem is from the foundation. If your foundation is weak, it's not at secondary school that your teachers are going to correct it. They're just building upon whatever is already weak. And at the university level, we know you're really on your own. So, and in I don't want to say advanced societies, but in other societies, it is the norm that your most qualified are those who teach the youngest. And as they grow, because they have the foundation, they are at liberty to choose what it is they want. My other challenge, or my other thing I would want to add, so you're asking what I'll take out, but what I would want to add, or what I'll change, is the perception that the skills, jobs that require using the physical, are of a lesser importance than academics.
That is interesting that you say that.
Yeah.
Every time there's a broken hinge in the house, we call a carpenter. Yes. When your car is broken, after you've made all that wonderful money and you've built that house, you still want to go and trust your life and that of your dependents to someone who, quote unquote, wasn't educated, but fixes your car, and you hit the road with that.
So who's the educated one?
How do we change that?
It's mindset. It's mindset, Inshira. And I think the blame lays on each and every one of us. It lays on our doorsteps. Parents, in today's 21st century in Ghana, we still have parents saying, I want you to grow to become an accountant. And I want you to grow to become a doctor. What you were not hearing, I'm saying today's 21st century because careers that have evolved in the last 10 years, 15 years with the surgence of the internet use. The world is an oyster out there for our young ones. And there are so many careers or fields that our youth can enter where we as parents have failed to look up. And so when they come to us and say, we want to do such and such, we frown upon it and say, there's no money in it. But again, my existence has always been about, is it always about the money? Because I have met so many, and I'll use the popular example, bankers, especially female bankers, who are not happy where they are. But it is what pays the bills. As a society, if you compare us to other societies, our dynamism is limited to, again, the old school. So we are either doctors, lawyers, accountants, you name them. Engineers, architects, and that's about. In between that, you dare not have a chef. You dare not, your son cannot say he wants to become a chef. But we know the world over, the top chefs who are respected, some are even flown from their countries to other countries. But my son dare not tell me he wants to be a chef. The way we look down on some of these careers without understanding why. Because you see, when in the past, and I grew up as my grandmother's daughter. As in, I did a lot of. She did, yes, so she molded me, and she wasn't educated. And back in the time, what persisted was that when you were not academically bright, you were asked to go and learn how to sew, learn how to cook, or be a in a catering business, or learn how to do hairdressing or plumbing and sorts. Because typically the people who run those institutions were themselves not necessarily educated. Because I have come to learn, and if we all look at it, that you need to be mathematically savvy to be a craftsman. To sew, hairdressing with people who use relaxers in their hairs. If your science is not strong, you should not be in hairdressing. So as I say, we've limited our understanding of some of these careers to think that when you read the sciences, you can only become a doctor. But you could actually read the sciences. And I know of the brand Naya. I've forgotten her last Nanama. Is it Yanka maybe?
Yeah, I think it's in.
She has a science background, and look at how she's applying it. She's applying it in cosmetics. Why can't we have people who make cosmetics for our skin? Why can't we have people learn? So our children are learning science, or he's learning architecture, and becomes a dressmaker. What is wrong with it? And yet we will fly out of here and go and buy the Versace's, the who nots. And what background we think they had. If we want to build our brands, if we want to be, I think that where we're headed with this myopic definition of education is where we were many years ago, probably before independence.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you mentioned independence, because it seems that we have not as yet shaking off the shackles of colonialism. Because from the little I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the colonial system of education sought to create clerks and administrators and a few lawyers and people who just essentially, after independence, would just continue to run the system. Yes. So that became the desire of everyone. Okay. They stood out in society, they had the nice houses, they were able to afford cars after university and all of those things. So in our bid to emulate and also strive to live comfortable lives, we narrowed ourselves into thinking that the field of expertise should lie in one of these spaces. But the world is changing now.
Yes.
We have footballers who today are wealthy, and that's because of their skill. They didn't have to go to university to express that. We have top musicians, talent that's doing so. Is it that we have totally decided to remain dogmatic and holding on to these things of the past, when the people who colonized us themselves today are churning out people who are changing the popular culture around us because of everything else but formal education?
It's a straightforward yes. We are. I think you used the right words. We are shackled mentally to our pre-colonial era, and yes, the need then was to have clerks and the secretaries who would, as it were, carry on with the work. But post that, so I will use an example of having a house help who's always, you pay them to clean your house, and what have you not. And then one day they come of age and say, I'm going to get married and start my own family. And they move away from you, and they still continue doing that at home and expect to be paid for it. By whom? We're just not, it's going to sound very cliched, but I just think we're not thinking outside of a box. And the bigger challenge for me is that we're not involving our youth in our decision making and taking. You know, I work with children, Inshira, the amount of creativity and talent that together these I don't want to call them children, but the youth have, where we refuse to tap into and just use them, you know, as and when we want to show off. No wonder the minute they leave our shores, they excel. Because when we are doing anything in this country, and I mean it, Inshira, think about it, anything. We're building houses, there's no play place for children. We're running a restaurant, there's no children's menu. There's no children's cutlery, there's no children's plates. We're building schools, there's no play area. We've cemented the whole place, begging for floods. There's nothing we do in this country.
You go into public spaces, bathrooms are built for older
Only
people.
older people. The only one place I know of where, and so when I have the time I go, there's the Legon Botanical Gardens, which is run privately. And there was this private person who had foresight. So he's got a loo that is shorter than the normal because it's a children's park. You know, but as a people, and get the enigma for me. This is the same society that defines you by the number of children you have or don't have. If you don't have children, you don't count. You have the children, where do you keep them? Where do you entertain them? Look at our children's park. That for me, if you got into any country and anyone asked for your children's park and you showed them that, it speaks volumes of where you hold your children high or not. And that has been one of the biggest challenges. We don't include children in our conversations, nor our spaces, because traditionally, children must not be heard. So when we're having adult conversations, as we call them these days, I mean, they're watching all these movies and they know, I mean, I have a 5-year-old who had to sit down with me and we had to talk about bad words like RAPE and FUCK. This is what I do because I can't say them. We had to talk about them because her classmates had started using the words. So I don't even know what an adult conversation is anymore because we've exposed them to so much. But then again, we're having an adult conversation and we ask them to move away. And so they basically, there's no space for your children in your life. Socially, economically, there's no space for them.
And yet they're exposed to all the peer learning that you have no influence in.
Over. The reason I'm saying it has to be structured. There's a lot of peer influence. And look, if I said I was going to share with you the revelations that I have been exposed to through my program, I would be doing a great disservice to the children, because the impression I am trying to create is not that they're bad children, but is that because we don't have space for them, the children who are left on their own and live at home with their house help and drivers, because as in the parents don't even live in the country.
Wow.
Yes, they just have a
and
house
some
help.
who live here also have long hours away from
Long
their home,
hours.
so very little
they only see
time
them.
is
Yes,
spent with
see them over the
children.
weekend. So they're all their learning, or their adults that they hold in high esteem are either their peers or the help that's around them. The things that are going on around with our children is what they grow up with. Now, this is one question I've been asking myself, Inshira. So if I keep pushing my child out of my space, so you want to play, okay, go and use your iPad or whatever it is we get them. When you are in your twilight years, you're in your 70s and your 80s, who do you think is going to look after? It won't be them. I can guarantee you that, because you haven't taught them how to care for others. But you've taught them how to have their own space. So they have their own room, TV, own driver, So that's the lifestyle they're going to be used to. They're not going to they're not going to have empathy for anybody else, including yourself. And now, middle class Ghana, we're sending our children out much earlier. In our time, you had to finish tertiary before you thought. But now, at secondary level, we're shooting them off. Yeah, times have changed. I can accept that. But have you armed them enough such that they would come back and be of any impact, especially the positive one, to our society.
There's a lot of food for thought. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, I'm going to learn, and well, you and I together will learn a little bit more about the balance of formal education, the role of parents in all of that. How do we arm the youth for tomorrow? And we'll learn that from Eugenia's perspective through her life and work. Stay tuned. This is the Executive Lounge. We'll be back. Welcome back to the Executive Lounge with me, Inshira Ado. My guest today is Eugenia Tachie-Menson, the founder of the Young Educators Foundation, and they bring you the Spelling Bee and Young Debaters. It's a national debate competition for young people. And it's a fantastic idea, I mean, the stuff that you do. And I'm beginning to appreciate more the importance of the things that happen outside of the classroom but complement what happens in formal education. You're a parent and an educator, so you have a broader appreciation of the spectrum when it comes to education. Are we ever going to make the necessary arrangement to allow for co-curricular and extracurricular to sit and really interface with the formal education in a way that we help children become competitive globally?
Let me be politically correct. I'll replace the "are we going to" with "should we," and I'll answer a straight yes. Are we going to get there? It takes a collective effort to get us there. As I speak, I just found out that the national curriculum for our educational system is being reviewed. My questions were, how frequently does it happen? Who is involved? Which other stakeholders are involved? There are PTA associations in almost every school. Do we take feedback or do we take comments from them? Then there's the public, whose children go to these schools in which this curriculum is run. Do we take their feedback? I think that what I've learned is that the system or the education system runs as is because parents do not make time to question things. So that school managers, and this would include heads of schools and whatever, you know, take and make decisions on behalf of parents, and parents don't have a say-so. Now, it's sort of a vicious cycle. If you speak to parents, what they say is, well, the school didn't inform me. I was just there and I got a letter. When you go to the school says, we asked them to turn up for a meeting and they didn't, and we needed a quorum and we didn't get it, so we went ahead with what we thought was best. So, to begin with, parents need to understand that paying school fees and putting your child in any kind of school, be it grade A or grade D, is not the end of learning. In fact, it's the beginning. You need to be a part of that learning system. Or let me put it this way, as a parent, you're the first educator, you're the first teacher. Before your child went to school, they were mumbling something, they were saying something. You've probably taught them, you don't chew with your mouth open. You don't pick your nose in public. You would have taught them a few things. So you are a teacher yourself as a parent. So the point of taking children to school and not getting involved at all in what happens in the school is also, excuse me, what has gotten us where we are. The average parent you speak to has concerns about the curriculum and, you know, the fact that they're spending too many hours in school. Children are lugging too many books along. You know, you see them, it's like they're carrying their carry-on on a flight, hoarding books, and it's bad for their backs. Children under 10, and they're carrying like 5 kilos, 7 kilos on their backs, and walking distances, and doing 7 a.m., 7:30 to 5 p.m. on an average day. And coming back home with tons of homework and living in traffic hellholes where they leave home at about 4 a.m., eat in the car, get dressed in the car before we get to school at 7:30. I mean, it's as I say, it's such a vicious cycle that it doesn't take just a review of the curriculum. It also takes parents or us citizens to start asking some questions. So let's say I run a school called the Spelling Bee, and it is the most popular school in the city. You live in Ofanko, and this school is in Accra, or let me say in the Ridge area. It will take you a minimum of 2 hours to get to the side of town. I get it. You want the best education for your child, and you know that the Spelling Bee school, it offers the best. But have you asked yourself, so why can't we have a similar the Spelling Bee in our local? And that's when you now want to ask yourself, how does the system work anyway? I have an MP, I have a DCE,
A DC or an MCE.
I have an MCE,
Yeah.
there are budgets. Where are the spaces for schools? How does the school system work anyway? How do we get GES to ensure that we have a grading system in every community, in every district? So every district should have its own the Spelling Bee, which is the premium school, and then the others. So children are not traveling 2.5 hours to get to school and getting home after hours and having homework and doing homework on the way. But I mean, what are we doing to our children? What are we doing to ourselves? Policy was set way back when there were fewer cars on our streets. And so, you could do, back in our time, it's not that far though.
It's a good
20 years. Yeah, that's far.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Thanks for the wake-up call. I thought I was young. But we would walk to school. I lived in Ridge and I walked to Richard's school. There were days when I'm lucky my father would pick us. There were fewer cars on the streets.
And you had to trek over shorter distances.
Over shorter distances.
Today.
So as I say, if you're living in Ofanko and you're schooling in Ridge, there is no way that child will ever walk. And we are gradually turning all our children into these tin gods without realizing it. They can't walk anywhere because we all live far away from basic services, starting with schools. At age 9, 10, as we were saying, before, a child, you should be able to send a child to a neighbor who's maybe 10 houses away from yours.
So I will tell you, I think not too long ago, about 2 or so weeks ago, I happened to be, both my wife and I were at home with the children, and for some strange reason, I wanted to eat kenke. So there's a particular place we would rather buy kenke from, because it's from Jamestown. But my wife said, look, there's an equally good kenke not too far from the house. And then she calls the younger one, says, get me my purse. And then she says, okay, here's money. Go buy kenke. You and your brother, your older brother, go get us some kenke. I was like, hello, hey, why are you sending the children out? And she's like, oh, but they do it all the time. I said, and you've never told me? I was alarmed. So she said, listen, these kids are fine. They've done it before. They can do it. And so they left. And then I asked myself, and I was thinking out loud, and I said, oh my God, when I was the older one's age, I would get in a car from Kolebu, go to Accra Central, walk right through the Central Business District, go to the Ghana Library Board, go and spend the whole day there, walk through Kingsway, UTC, and still made it back home.
Yeah.
It made me realize that maybe we ought to start rethinking the way we're raising our children.
Sure, it's not maybe. We definitely have to. Our children are not fit. We have children who are as young as 10 and are on dialysis at Kolebu Hospital. Children who are obese, who shouldn't be, but basically energies consumed are never expended. That's how you gain weight. Children need carbohydrate to run around. So to begin with, they live in spaces where they can't run around. They go to school where they can't run around. I mean, some schools actually have stop running, don't run on their walls. And I wonder, so what are children supposed to do? Children are supposed to run. So if they can't run in school and they can't run at home and they eat rice, pizza, and what have you not?
All the carbs.
All the carbs, which they need. They need it so they can expend it. but it's not being expended. So what do we expect? So we're bringing on all these lifestyle ailments on our children. Quite apart from that, with the clear example as you were giving, I think that it's also the fact that because we're busy all the time as parents, we're doing everything for them. Look, I'm running late. You want to visit your friend? Let me drop you. It used to be you want to visit go walk to your friend's place. But again, to be fair, we're not in safe times. We're crowded now in our city. We're more crowded. I've been to other communities which are far less crowded, and children are okay to walk to neighbors' houses and whatever.
So the cost of urbanization is caught up with us.
Since it's caught up with us since, and we almost, and I'm referring to those of us who make this mistake without realizing, we almost make it look like it should be the norm. That, but I need to care for my child. I need to give my child everything he or she needs because that makes me a good parent. But not letting your child fall, cry, get up, nurse that pain means you're grooming a disaster for when they become adults, because then they don't know failure. They don't know how to fall and get up. So they will fall and probably never get up. Metaphorically and literally. We need, as parents and as individuals who have children, what we need to start doing really is to understand what we are doing to our children.
So do we have that understanding though?
I don't think
so. Where do you go to learn to be a good parent? I mean, is there a parenting school that we ought to go to?
You see, and sure, if I look at it as not necessarily learning to be a good parent, but I look at it this way. Someone has been entrusted in your care. If your relatives out in the village brought their child to you, you usually are careful. You don't need a book to tell you what to do. Same thing. A human being has been entrusted in your care. How do you make sure that you take care of them such that whomever gave that child to you, when they came back for their child, they'll have no questions? If you look at it that way, then we're not talking parenting. It's just, I need to do my job. My job is to make sure that this child turns out
better than they came in.
Better than they came in. It's all we're asking for. Now, the better is not necessarily traveling abroad all the time, giving them everything they ask for. You should know better because you're the adult. You should know that at certain times, you need to deprive a child of what they are used to so they learn value. Today's child does not know value. I want cake, and cake is produced. Kofi has a laptop. I also need one, and it's produced. Do you know how much it costs? There's a joke going around in the elite schools that when they come back from their summer holidays, is what they call them, but the long vacation, the question is, when you got on the plane, did you turn left or right?
Wow.
So if you turned left, you are with us because then you went business first. If you turn right, then your economy, you must be a house help.
Wow.
Yes. We have taught our children this kind of value. What we haven't taught them is that $4,000 ticket is probably someone's life savings. And what it can do, it can buy you a seat, but it can also buy you a future, pay your fees, build a house for somebody, feed somebody for the rest of their lives, pay someone's hospital bill, someone who's on dialysis and can't afford it. Those are values we're not teaching our children, to the point that what we are breeding now are children who don't identify with Ghana. When we vent our frustrations, like, you know how we do it. As for this country, there's nothing good in it. I mean, we listen to what we do to ourselves and then we blame the country. I keep saying the country has done nothing wrong. It's the individuals. It's land. The country is land. If they took all of us out and brought another set of people in, they probably would do a better job than we're doing.
And we'll go and start a whole
and we'll make the same mess over there. But if we are raising children and we're talking negativity all the time. So I am meeting a 10-year-old who was born outside of Ghana and insists that he's not Ghanaian and he has a typical typical Ghanaian name. He says, I'm not Ghanaian, I'm from such and such country. And I said, so I bothered to explain to him the concept of dual nationality. He understood, said, okay, so it means originally because my parents are from Ghana, I'm Ghanaian, and then because I was born there, I'm also from there. But I still choose there over here. Do you eat banku? No, that's Ghanaian food. I don't eat banku. What do you eat? Rice, pizza, bread, this, potatoes. Do you eat yam? No, I prefer potatoes over yam. The point I'm trying to make is that, so you're raising people who are not going to be confident. Yeah? So this is a young man, boy, who's going to be a man, who is sadly kidding himself into thinking he's not Ghanaian, not realizing that he's black. And the country he's saying he belongs to will not accept you. You're just a citizen by paper, but you're not one of them. When are we going to have that conversation with a child? We won't. And guess what? Secondary school level, we'll just ship him and trust him
to be okay.
To be okay in the West, when he has never even stopped a taxi in Accra. He's never stopped a taxi and negotiated. But we are okay letting him go out there and fend for himself. Over there, he won't have a driver. He can't afford it. So he will have to use public transport. And then we will sweat here, find, sweats and make our CDs. I keep saying it's always, I look at it as one of mine is either 6 times of theirs. So I need to work 6 times more and then gather that money and send to you out there. What are we doing to ourselves and our children to begin with?
So isn't this a reflection of the departure from ensuring that policies are all-encompassing, that it's giving us the holistic education that we need, and that as children we used to go on excursions and we used to go to see places and we used to go to learn. We went to the zoo. We don't have the zoo in Accra anymore. You went to the Ghana Library Board where you went to go and read. Is it that the state hasn't done its part and so the parents and the citizens are helpless?
Inshira, who makes up the state?
We vote for people and give them authority to do some work on our behalf.
So these people would have told us that maybe I will improve your school conditions, and so you voted for them. And if they're not doing it,
you wait for another 4 years.
Why do we wait? That's how it's always been my question. Why are we waiting? Why do we say 4 years is around the corner? Really? In 4 years' time, your 4-year-old will be 8 years old, and their problem would have been 4 years older. Why do we wait for 4 years? Why can't we start petitioning? Why can't we start asking for meetings with our MPs, our DCs, our MCs? We let them go scot-free. For all you know, they probably are dying to have such meetings with us, but wouldn't know where to start. Forget you not that most people we vote into office are not trained politicians, so may not even have the know-how. And some of us citizens may have been politicians in the past or lived with politicians and understand how things run. We need to be doing more of the demanding. Policymakers are just that. The parliamentarians are just lawmakers. That's it. But we want to turn them into tin gods where we can't approach them. And so, then they will do what they believe is in your interest. And if you don't query them, why do you wait 4 years and then you begin to query them? So if I'm stepping on your toe, and you voted me into power, you be quiet and let me mash that toe. 4 years, you tell me, well, you mashed my toe, so I'm not voting for you. Who gets hurt? You vote me out of office, but I would have gotten 4 years of whatever I wanted to get. The point I'm making is that we need to stop this wait for some Messiah. We're our own messiahs. We need to fix our own problems. And the power is the same way we're able to vote and put someone in office. It's the same way we need to go to that same person and say, you promised me this and that and the other, and you are not delivering. There may be a genuine reason why it's not happening, but you owe it to us to understand why it's not happening. But if you're not asking them, typically, if you're not asking me the questions, I can't start a conversation. You've asked me a question now, but if you hadn't, I probably would say something that's not within our script. We need to be a bit more assertive, is what I find. That there's a bit of you know what? Let's leave it to God.
Passive aggression, eh?
Passive aggressive. Passive aggressive. Your favorite term.
We ought to do a lot more than that. We're going to
Yeah.
take another break. We'll be back with the backstraight of this conversation. Quite illuminating, and I'm sure there's a lot more where that came from. So stay tuned for more. Welcome back to the Executive Lounge with me, Inchira Ado, and my guest, founder of Young Educators Foundation, Eugenia Tachie-Menson. Quite a lot of illumination that parenting, raising the right, future leaders, and ensuring that they're globally competitive. Question though is, how do we get them to be globally competitive?
How do we get our children to be globally competitive? Exposure. Exposure, not necessarily in how we typically define it. Exposure through other programs, which are educational, but definitely not classroom style. So the programs I run, the spelling bee, basically it's an English lesson program. That's what it is. But any child who's been through will tell you, no, it's not. Because what happens in the classroom is exactly the opposite of what happens with the spelling bee, because we make it fun. And we get children to read without realizing that's exactly what you're doing. So we are teaching you about words. I mean, the basic principle is that the English language is borrowed from at least 13 other languages. So depending on what word is being given to you, depending on where the word is coming from, is how you would spell it or how you'd pronounce it. So if you took a child asked you typically, why is pharmacy spelled starting with a PH but giving you the F sound, and family giving you the F sound or spelled with an F? Why can't you spell pharmacy with an F? And the reason is because of where the word is coming from. So pharmacy is from the Greek origin. In the Greek origin, the F sound is spelled with a PH. So immediately the next thing we would tell a child like that is, so give me other words that what you just taught the child to do is to research, think critically. And you've also taught them confidence immediately, because they do know a word. So you start hearing phone, philosophy, and it's coming from them. So again, the system is child-led, not teacher-led. So I'm not going to stand there and write, the Greek alphabet does not do this. And so, the Greek letters with the PH gives you the F sound.
At least 20 words
At least 20
like
or
that.
30 words.
And stop them from thinking.
Yes. And that is exactly what we find in the classrooms. So we teach dictation, and we call it spelling. Dictation is typically where you throw words at a child and they have to regurgitate. So say, spell rain, spell horse, spell hair, and they start spelling it. But then
in our time it was mental.
Thank you. But then there are variants of rain. So there's the rain that comes from the skies, there's a rain of a king, and the rain of a horse.
Of a horse.
So which rain are you asking the child to spell? But at every school I've gone in and done this test, they all give me the obvious ones. So rain is R-A-I-N.
That's right.
Hair is H-A-I-R. And what was the third one? I've forgotten. And then I write the variants, and then they're all quiet. And I say, so we're turning our children into robots. You need, and that's why we say that dictation can never be replaced with spelling.
Why isn't the Ghana Education Service embracing something as awesome as the spelling bee?
I think it is a basic lack of appreciation, and it comes to the co-curricular, extracurricular concept. So co-curricular is typically things you do that complement or add on to what is in the classroom. So if, for example, you're doing science and you're learning how water is H2O and behaves, and then you go and do a science project. So you're told, go and create a yellow colored H2O. You've just taken what from, so it's a practical side. Now, extracurricular is like the AMPE and the football and whatever, they don't have a direct correlation to what is taught in the classroom, but it helps because you're bringing some mathematical skills to that football. You know what I mean? You're bringing
also teamwork,
which is not taught. Yeah. So where our spelling bee program is co-curricular, but in Ghana it's seen as extra. So I mean, even in schools turn us away How much more?
Really?
Oh yeah, schools turn us away, parents turn us away. So how much more the Ghana Education Service? So that we need an audience, if I may put it that way.
So why hasn't the GES adopted the spelling bee as part of the curriculum?
I think it's a lack of appreciation of the role that a program like the Spelling Bee plays in literacy. It's a purely literacy program. As I was, coming and thinking that we probably are having the challenges as an organization that we do because we're seen as an extracurricular program. So there's co-curricular and there's extracurricular. Co-curricular typically would mean, say, the practical aspect of what you've learned in a classroom. So if you are doing, say, food science and you've gotten a recipe of how to do banku, and then you're told, go home, prepare banku and okra, that is co. Because you've just put into practice.
Reminds me how I learned the concept of evaporation.
Okay.
So it was described in class that you make the salt solution, you keep boiling till everything, and then you have the salt. So I did it without adult supervision.
So there were a few disasters. So, but the point I'm trying to make, so that if you learn that in a classroom, and then let's say there's a competition. So we give five people, or everybody's given that assignment to go and work on. That becomes co. Now, extra is the footballs and the ampeys and the what have you nots, which don't have any direct correlation on what you're learning in the classroom, but they complement it. Okay? So our program, which is a co-curricular, because it's hinged on literacy, is rather seen in Ghana as extracurricular. We have schools turn us away, parents turn us away, that we want our children to focus on their studies. We don't want any child's play. That's how they see the spelling bee, because they themselves don't have an appreciation of the program. It's basically what the problem is. That
What's the Young Debaters about? What does this do for preparing the youth for global competitiveness?
Young Debaters is our other program that targets secondary school students. The focus really is to give our young ones a stage, basically to be heard. Now, the other focus is to teach them public speaking skills, which I am sad to say that we find wanting in our public spaces. Certain pronouncements and how they're made, certain choice of words, and how adults, are using them in the public space. So Young Debaters allows for our young ones to learn the art of public speaking. It also gives them the opportunity to explore and research. So it's, even though it's called a debating competition, it typically focuses on public speaking. Now, what they learn to do in public speaking is to research. So, typically in Ghana, when we're doing a debate competition, there's a motion and the people speak for or against. But in the Young Debaters, there's a theme. So let's even call it a motion. You do your own research and come up with a topic. So the theme, in a year, there was a theme that said, a house that is divided cannot stand. So you need to come up, go and do your research on a theme like that. Come up with your own topic, come and defend or speak against it and tell us where you stand. Immediately, what you're doing is teaching the child research, critical thinking, and seeing things from other people's perspectives. Debates typically can be a bit myopic. You've got to defend it, and whether you like it or not, you're defending it.
So this goes beyond the binary space and allows you to look at things from various perspectives.
And for our educational system, such programs, the Spelling Bee and Young Debaters, are so critical because critical thinking has been removed from our learning. It has totally been removed. We just tell me what I said to you. Let me give you an example. A friend who had just relocated from the UK took her child into a top school that her husband used to be in. She's a foreigner. Took her child to this top school, and the first term, there was an assignment to draw a marketplace. So the boy comes home and draws a marketplace with his mother. And they go, and he takes it to school and comes back the next day and is in tears. Why? He got a 0. Why? The mother looks at the work and thinks, but we did everything you said to label it, we labeled it. So she went to the school to find out, why have you marked us wrong? Again, you know, when we mark wrong, they don't give reasons. So the mother wanted to know. I said, I asked him to draw a marketplace, and he drew a shop. He drew, and the boy had drawn a Tesco. This
because
is someone,
that's the market
because
he knows.
that's the market he knows. I'm sorry, even if you put Tesco outside, we've got ShopRite. We've even got corner stores in this country who sell tomatoes. Is that not a market? He said he was looking for Mokola. Everybody else drew that except this boy. Obviously, the parent took the child out of the school, but it speaks volumes of how myopic our teaching is. If a teacher, I would have asked, because he's the only one who did the odd thing, I would have asked that child, why is this a market? And he would have probably have told you, because they sell everything there. And you would have learned as a teacher from it, which is the other thing our educational system and society doesn't think is possible, that we can learn from children.
That's right.
That the child will, and you will learn from it that, okay, so market is not just Mokola where women are wearing wide brimmed hats, but market is going into the mall. It's also a market.
That's right.
You may not get Kobe there, but it's a market.
Wow. This is all time would allow us. It's one of these conversations that you wish you could just keep going on. But I'd like to say a big thank you to you, Eugenia, for making time for us on the Executive Lounge.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
It has been for me as well. And I have 5 takeouts from this conversation. Number 1 is that you should be deliberate, and being deliberate about the kind of child you want to raise, the kind of society you want them to grow in, being deliberate about the outcomes that you desire. That will shape how you act today. That will shape the decisions you make towards raising your children or even growing your business, if that's what you want to do. Number 2 is that we must be demanding. Okay, Malcolm Gladwell calls it concerted cultivation. You can't expect your child to turn out a certain way when you have not demanded for a certain outcome or output from their actions. So likewise, when you're talking to your teachers, your MPs, you're talking to people who are accountable to you to a certain extent, demand that accountability. Keep asking for answers and you will get them. What you inspect is what you get, is not what you expect. Number 3 is that we should have a futuristic mindset. Why? Eugenia decided to start the Young Educators Foundation because she felt that critical thinking, for example, is being taken out of our teaching. The whole fun of being able to learn, the confidence that children require to be well-rounded adults in the future is something that is lacking today. And those children or the young people today are the adults in the future. So if we're not thinking about how tomorrow's generation will run the nation or the world and hand it off to another generation after them, then we've done them a disservice. So it's important that you're thinking about the future. And the 4th thing that I'm taking away from this, and I hope you do too, is this: that do not be afraid to be truthful. Give of your best, but give of what you have. Do not go thinking about what other people have. Stick to what you have. Teach those values to the young people, and they will be good and better for it. Finally, do something that makes you happy. Eugenia is not an extremely excitable person, but when she talks about education, her whole being lights up. And I think there's something we can all learn from that. It's been fantastic having you on the Executive Lounge. Hopefully we'll do it again.
We should.
Yes, we should. And you, thank you so much for watching us, and we'll come your way again with another edition of the Executive Lounge. As always, thank you to the team. Go forward, make rain. Shalom.